Good afternoon. Hopefully you have the bell ringer, and our first job is to prove that there are two triangles that are congruent. So I look down at the picture and I can easily see the two triangles. The next thing I'm going to look at are the givens. One of the givens is that C is the midpoint of EB. So let's take a look. There's EB. And if you have the midpoint, that means that those two little segments are going to be congruent to each other. Also, we know that C is the midpoint of AD. So we have that giant segment AD, and we have those two little segments AC and CD. Those are going to be congruent also. So when it's time to take a look at my logical steps and reasoning for the sides, it is given that AB is congruent to ED, and also we figured out that CD is congruent to AC, and the reason for that stemmed from the fact we had a midpoint. We're going to do the same thing with segment BC congruent to segment CE. Again, that stemmed from the fact that we had a midpoint. In terms of the angles, it is given that angle B is congruent to angle E. Now, in terms of question number 2, I'm going to look at the reason for a hint. And the hint says vertical angles are congruent. So I look, and how do I know which vertical angles are important? They're the ones that are inside the triangle. So those are my vertical angles that are congruent. So angle ACB is congruent to angle DCE. Lastly, we're looking for angle A is going to be congruent to angle D, and that reason is the no choice theorem. You also might see it written as the third angle theorem, but I prefer no choice. So our conclusion, we have to be very specific about which triangle is congruent to ABC. All of our corresponding angles and sides have to match up. So angle A was congruent to angle D, so D comes first. Angle B was congruent to angle E, so E comes second. And then the last point is C. Now, why do I know that these two triangles are congruent? Because I specifically outlined that all three pairs of corresponding angles are congruent and all three pairs of sides are congruent. So that Y is kind of like a summary. Let's take a look at the next problem. And here we're reviewing our included vocabulary word, included sides, included angles. So the included angle between XY and XZ is angle X. The non-included angles between YZ and XZ, that would be angle X and angle Y. The included side between angle Y and angle Z is segment YZ, and the non-included sides between angle X and angle Y are XZ and YZ. Let's take a look at our notes for today. For our notes, we have a lot of objectives, as you can see, but in summary, you don't really need all 6 pieces to be congruent in order to say that two triangles are congruent. We have shortcuts. So we are going to look at the possible shortcuts right now. Then, when you do your GeoGebra activity, you will discover which shortcuts actually work. So let's start with the top left box. I would like for you to pause and write down the 3 sets of corresponding figures. So you should have seen that all 3 sets of sides are congruent. The shortcut in this case is side, side, side. And we abbreviate side, side, side with SSS. Let's take a look at the middle top box. Again, I want you to write down the 3 sets of corresponding shapes. So for this picture, we had 2 sides that were congruent and 1 angle. Well, in order to write the shortcut, this is where our included angle comes into play. Because our angle is included, the shortcut that we write is side, angle, side. For the third box on the top, please pause and write down all 3 sets of corresponding sides. In this picture, again, we have 2 sets of sides that are congruent, but this time it's the non-included angle that is congruent. This shortcut has to be written differently. We're also not allowed to write down any bad words, so the abbreviation is side, side angle, or we're indicating that the angle is the non-included angle. Let's take a look at the bottom. So let's look at the bottom left. Please pause and write down all 3 sets of corresponding shapes. So this time we have 2 angles and the included side. The way that we would write this shortcut is angle, side, angle. Again, showing that the side is included between the 2 angles. Let's write down all of our corresponding parts for the middle picture. So this picture is similar to the one just on the left. We again have 2 angles that are congruent, but this time it's the non-included side, and that makes a difference how we write our shortcut. We're going to say it's angle, angle, side, indicating that the side is not included. As we take a look at our last picture, the way that we describe this relationship is based off of the fact that all 3 sets of angles are congruent, and this abbreviation is angle, angle, angle. For the rest of the activity, you're going to need to go to our geometry webpage. The lesson links is going to be in Chapter 4. Today is the 8th, and that's actually the wrong date. I apologize. Regardless, you're going to be looking for the congruent triangle exploration. This will bring you to our GeoGebra activity. You're going to click View Book. There are 6 activities that correspond to our 6 shortcuts. As we look at the first one, these 2 triangles are congruent. I can tell because they are shaded. My job is going to be to try to move the angles or the sides around to see if it is possible to create 2 triangles that are not congruent. In this particular example, nothing I do will prevent these 2 triangles from being congruent. So with this given information, the triangles will always be congruent no matter what. Well, which scenario is this? All 3 sets of sides are congruent. I can tell because they've been measured. So for your first example, these 2 triangles are congruent and the shortcut was side, side, side. So please continue with your exploration. So just use the arrows on top, and I can tell you right now from this picture, these 2 triangles are not congruent. Is it possible to drag them so that they are? That's something that you need to explore. When you finish all 6 explorations, please ask for the assignment that is due tomorrow, and I will see you tomorrow.